Ambassador Percy is the one who has just addressed us with messages of support and encouragement. Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, after all the felicitation and messages, we come to two special lectures by our two leaders and also two organizers. First, by Dr. Chris Seiple. So I'd like to call on Dr. Seiple to deliver his special lecture. Dr. Seiple is a specialist on religion and security, and is also a former Marine, if you are interested, and has a PhD from Stanford University. Dr. Seiple.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, distinguished guests, and with your excellencies. An opportunity and precious privilege made possible by the Venerable Sitagu Sayadaw, with whom we are very, very fortunate to partner and to have this conversation today and tomorrow, and continue to have over the days to come as we visit this wonderful and golden country. I'm also grateful for the Catholic Bishops' Conference, the Myanmar Council of Churches, the Judson Center for Research at Myanmar Institute for Theology for helping to facilitate this conference as well. I had some time yesterday spent some time yesterday with the Venerable Sitagu and was reminded again about how much I do not know and how much I have to learn. And I'm looking forward to learning from him and from his monks and from the academy here and all of us gathered here. He has asked me to provide some observations about our global context from the work of our institute on several different continents, in Africa, the Middle East, and in Central, Southeast, and South Asia. And I do so in that context of great humility, realizing that we, and I especially, have much to learn and look forward to learning from you. But I wanted to give 5 observations about the world that we live in and how that, and maybe these observations might contribute to building peace and security and coexistence. So here's the first observation. The pessimist has all the facts. And what I mean by that is this. Take a look at the headlines from any newspaper in any continent, and there's plenty of evidence to demonstrate why this is a terrible world that is getting much worse. In a world where violence is condoned by religion, especially these last 2 or 3 weeks. It wounds the soul to see what humans are doing to humans in the name of violence, in the name of their religion sometimes. So the second observation is this. If we are to create new facts, and if we are to create optimists, we must first begin to practice the essence of wisdom. And I think wisdom begins with the naming of things properly, so that you can get the questions right in order to figure out how we are going to live with our deepest differences and to coexist. Here are some facts that we have observed in the context where we have worked outside of Myanmar that we need to name accurately if we are to be optimistic and to construct new solutions and new paradigms for working together. First fact is this: we are all minorities somewhere. I happen to be a Christian. I come from a Christian majority country. But all the countries where we work, Christians are minorities. It's in my self-interest to treat those who are not Christians in my country well, because I hope that Christians will be treated well in the countries around the world. Christianity also teaches that you should love God and love neighbor and love enemy. So not only is it the right thing to do, but it's in our self-interest. And every faith tradition has something to say about the golden rule, about loving our neighbor, about welcoming the stranger. We're all minorities someplace. So treat the minority well among yourselves and expect the same in kind. around the world. The second fact that we need to name quite bluntly is that religion has been a part of the problem. We have to realize that, and we have to take accountability for that, especially those who take our faith seriously. But as we think about new policy solutions, we also have to ask this question. If religion is a part of the problem, can it be a part of the solution? Can the best of faith defeat the worst of religion? Can each of us go back to the essence of our Holy Scriptures? Recover the commands to love your neighbor and defeat and conquer the worst of yourself, as the Venerable Sitagu said in his opening remarks. And therefore create a place where we can mutually respect one another. That's the purpose of this conference. That's why we're getting together. Now there's some other characteristics to our world that I think help us understand wisdom. One characteristic is this: there is no global challenge that any of us can solve by ourselves. In some ways that's liberating. In some ways that's terrifying. Because there's no state that can solve the issues that we face, the global challenges that we face in our particular countries. There is no non-state actor. Which is to say this: in all of our countries, governments from the top down and grassroots from the bottom up have to work together. Again, it's not only the right thing to do, it's in our self-interest. We have to be in a position where we can partner and speak wisely to one another. And if it's a global challenge, we have to be able to transcend borders. If government-to-government relations is called track 1 in academic speak, and people-to-people relations are called track 2, ours is a track 1.5 world. Governments and grassroots working together across borders, within countries, with faith communities speaking prophetically into that space, calling the people who follow their faith to live out the best of their faith and defeat the worst of religion. These are the times that we live in, and this is the responsibility of faith leaders as we try to be wise about how we engage. Which is also to say we have to speak truth with love to each other and receive truth with love. That's a hard thing to do sometimes. It's hard to look in the mirror. It's always the other person's fault. And it is the human condition to be defined against them, those people over there. Not me, I'm a nice guy, just ask me. We have to speak the truth in love. In my tradition, love can be defined only one way, and that is unconditionally, and to give forgiveness when no one asks. That is what Christ did on the cross. But to think about it in a manner that transcends faiths and governments, and to be very practical about love, there's an acronym that we use sometimes at the Institute for Global Engagement. Listen, observe, verify, engage. LOVE. Be very practical about how you love your neighbor and build partnerships of trust and mutual respect. So if this is hopefully some wisdom that I've learned from other places around the world, from other different groups and countries, how do we think about applying that in our own countries? So here's my third observation. We need, in our respective countries, in our local provinces and states, and globally, we need a safe space to have the conversation. Which again is why this conference is so important. Where can we have a safe space to speak truth in love and talk about very honest differences as we try to be wise together? We have to have the safe space. The safe space, if it is done right, will produce a spiritual architecture from which good solutions can come. And by spiritual architecture, this is what I mean. People of irreconcilable theological and philosophical differences can contribute the very best of their faith and beliefs and values into a common moral framework that serves the common good, and that people of all faiths can bring their beliefs into the discussion of public policy. and what it means to be people and citizens of their country. You have to have that spiritual architecture, but you can only have that spiritual architecture if you're willing to welcome the stranger, to enter the space, to live the best of your faith, to speak and receive truth with love. It's not for weak people. It's very hard to do, and often it is no fun, especially when you look in the mirror, because we have all contributed to the problems. Now, if you have that safe space, a couple other things take place, I think. One, people begin to participate because they receive dignity. There's dignity and difference. And we must give people the dignity that is accorded to them as individuals. Secondly, we also see a space that includes women. Let me state a very obvious fact. Women are 50% of the world's population. They have to be included in all discussions of practical policy. In fact, the only thing less included than religion in international affairs is women of faith. We need a seat for them at the table. Also at the table has to be the youth. In many ways, the youth understand coexistence much better than the adults. We have much to learn from them. But at the same time, elders in society have to set the patterns of behavior for them to practice. Otherwise, they can learn hate. And we cannot tolerate hate. We cannot tolerate that. So, my fourth observation is this. If you have this safe space of a spiritual architecture where all are welcomed, you eventually have a conversation about coexistence. And coexistence is ultimately a conversation about citizenship and constitution. Now, those two words are about the most sensitive words I've encountered in almost every country I visited. Let me start with my own. We Americans are so passionate about respect for other and religious freedom because we have made so many mistakes about how we treat the minority among us. Our Constitution started with human beings being counted as 3/5 of a person. The Africans as slaves in our country were counted as 3/5 of a person. We know about sorrow and suffering and danger that results when you do not treat the minority in your midst as full and equal citizens under the rule of law. We are still suffering from that sin, from that evil. And Myanmar is at this wonderful opportunity where things are beginning anew. Please don't make the mistake that we made. Please don't make that, because it will echo across the centuries. Now, we can also reduce the conversation about citizenship and constitution to a few things. And it is not my place to tell you or anybody what you should do with your constitution or how you should define citizenship. All I can share with you is some characteristics of the discussions that I've observed around the world. First, citizenship exists at many levels. It exists at a spiritual level. 84% of the world believes in something greater than themselves. You can't put religion in a box, folks. Religion is in all the boxes. People of faith are in all the sectors of society, waiting to be used according to the best of their faith. There's a spiritual citizenship. There's a global citizenship. Sex trafficking, terrorism, AIDS, health, humanitarian disasters. We have to work together. It is not a question of if, but when we partner. Will we demonstrate respect for the other in the process of partnership to address the common challenges? We are all global citizens. We also have state identities and citizenships, and we have ethnic identities. I am of German-Danish stock, and I live in a country called America that I see as a gift from my God to steward. It takes enormous maturity to steward those various citizenships and identity. And we have to encourage each other because it's too easy to be defined against one another. So the questions for the individuals in society can be reduced to this. Am I going to tolerate or celebrate somebody who does not look, act, or vote like I do, or pray like I do? Let me give you the answer. Tolerance isn't enough in this global world. We have to move from toleration to celebration into mutual respect. Otherwise, we will sink into stereotypes and dehumanize and commit violence against one another in the name of religion. The policy question is also equally simple and equally difficult. Will the policies of the states of our world, will they encourage assimilation or integration? Assimilation says that the minorities have to look like the majority culture. Just not good enough. Integration says we are going to bring people in, not despite, but because of their ethnic and religious and spiritual and global citizenships. And to speak with the maturity about those identities at this public square, at the public policy table. Our world needs countries with constitutions and citizenships that celebrate and integrate. We cannot afford to tolerate and assimilate. That is the past time. So, the last observation. What happens when you have this space? I think 4 key things happen. The first thing is that we have to realize that the process of building the space is the product itself. If the space did not previously exist, and it exists now, we are all called upon to steward it. The more people come into the space, the more we have to talk to each other. The second thing is this, trust results. If I talk to somebody that I have never met before and continue to talk to them, stereotypes go down, trust goes up. Now there's opportunities for real partnership that are sustainable, that can address the global challenges. The third result of the safe and sacred space that results from the spiritual architecture is good scholarship. We need good scholarship to inform all of our thinking, to have a common view about how we do education, how we do all kinds of things to address the global challenges. Good scholarship leads to good training. And good training and education is necessary to change a mindset in order to change behavior. You cannot change behavior unless you change the mindset. You cannot change the mindset unless you have good education and training. The last thing that results from the space is the emergence of sufficient consensus. And just enough consensus across theological and political and philosophical divides to think about how we take on the global challenges together, respecting the different points of theological and moral departure that we came from into a common moral framework that serves the common good. But you've got to have that space. And you've got to be able to have the narrative of citizenship and constitution that results from the discussion of coexistence. In conclusion, let me share 2 things. Because this is a conversation about sharing our global lessons as well as our personal experiences. I happen to be an American, a Christian who happens to be American, and I happen to be a Virginian, another identity. I've lived in Virginia most of my life, and we have a famous Virginian. His name is Thomas Jefferson. He did a lot of good and bad things in his life. I can offer you my own critique of his leadership. But when he died, he put 3 things on his gravestone because he was an intellectually honest person. And he put the 3 things down, the essence of his life's work. The first was the Religious Freedom Statute of 1786. He and the other founding fathers and Roger Williams before them understood that we are all minorities someplace and that we will define against them. And when we define against them, we create violence, and it affects the stability of the state. Religious freedom, you have to have mutual respect, or you will have violence and instability of the state. That is the link to security. You have to be hard-headed and soft-hearted how you do that. But you have to have mutual respect. The second thing is education is important. I cannot change behavior unless I change the mindset, which means I need good educational institutions. He founded the University of Virginia. And the third thing is he's the author of the Declaration of Independence. You cannot be truly independent unless you have a respect for the other that includes and celebrates and integrates the minority. And you have the education to deepen and expand the safe and sacred space for the ongoing conversations that we face. Now, the last thing I'll say is this. I'm also a Christian. And in many ways, what we're talking about here is how do we step into a state of reconciliation among very different faiths and very different ethnic groups, globally speaking. The best definition of reconciliation I've ever heard comes from a scholar by the name of John Paul Lederach. And he cites a Spanish translation of Psalm 85:10. And in that translation, it says this: when peace and justice embrace, and truth and mercy kiss, that is when we have reconciliation. And so I hope our comments here today, our discussions today and tomorrow, will be the beginning of a process to search for what it means to operate and be practical at the intersection of peace and justice and truth and mercy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sayadaw, for your inspiring lecture. And for